From the 2016 National Volunteering Conference, Canberra, you're listening to a series of podcasts powered by Pop-Up Radio Australia.
How to create a powerful movement by building a network of like-minded volunteers. That's what you all want to know. Jamie Devenish is with the CFA, or Country Fire Authority. There it goes, there's that theme again. In Victoria, Jamie joined the CFA in 2011 after starting his emergency management career working at the Victorian Bushfire Reconstruction and Recovery Authority following the 2009 Victorian bushfires, which we all remember all too well. He's a business graduate, a lover of all things community. He's part of the Victorian SES. We had SES speakers a little bit earlier this afternoon. And of course, being from Victoria, he's also a keen footballer. Please welcome Jamie Devenish.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for having me. I understand this is the graveyard shift, and for some of you, I'm probably the only thing standing between you and the wine bar, so we'll try and have some fun in this session. I've already heard a few comments. Maybe given the slightly light turnout, maybe some people are already there, I'm not sure. As Andrea mentioned, my name's Jamie Devenish, and for the last 5 years I've been working on what we call at CFA the Member Engagement Program. And I'm currently on secondment with Emergency Management Victoria, just doing a short project and returning to CFA in July. But what I'm going to talk about today is two things. The first is 8 generic tips on how to create a volunteer-led movement. They're very generic, they could be adapted or used in any volunteer-led movement you're trying to create in whatever industry you work in, or any change program for that matter. And the example within each of the 8 tips is using my experience across the member engagement team and what our volunteers themselves have done to drive local community safety activity, or we like to term to fight fires with conversations. So the 8 tips and then the example from within CFA. Before I get on to the 8 tips, I just wanted to share a little bit of background for those of you that might not be familiar with CFA in Victoria. There are 1,200 fire brigades scattered all over Victoria. Every little town, every little community, often if there isn't even, often a little locality, it might not even be a town, has a fire shed. And in 33 out of those 1,200, they're what we call our integrated brigades, where we have paid career firefighters there 24/7 to support the volunteers. And in the other 1,150 odd brigades, they're 100% volunteers. And there are nearly 60,000 of them across the state. And what do we do? What are we legislated to do? We're responsible for the prevention and suppression of fires in the country area of Victoria. The prevention and suppression. So tell me, which out of those two things in isolation, the prevention, so stopping them from occurring, suppression, putting them out, which one do you think culturally our volunteers, our brigades on the ground tend to concentrate on? They do, and which is probably, or in most, it is, according to most research, far cheaper, easier and more effective in terms of achieving our mission, which is to protect lives and property. Well done. And this presentation is all about how our volunteers themselves have been shifting that culture over the last 5 years. On to the tips. The first one is identify your impetus for change. What is the driving force or the reason that you can keep coming back to as to why you're going to start this movement, why you're going to go on a journey, why you're going to create change? We had a few. The first one was Black Saturday. Now, hands up, who was in Victoria 7th of February 2009? Fair few of you? Great. You'll understand how hot, dry, windy it was that day. 173 people lost their lives in Victoria that day from the bushfires. Over 2,000 homes were destroyed within a 24-hour period. It was 46.7 degrees in Melbourne. It was above 47 degrees most of the state, 100 km/h northerly winds. And a friend of mine, Bruce Jewell, is in this truck. He's driving this truck. And we think about prevention or suppression. Why isn't he putting that out? Why doesn't he just go back and squirt some water at it? Maybe that's what it was. It really changed, I guess, our attitude to sometimes we can't suppress fire. And it really highlighted the importance of prevention and education for us. The impetus for change. After that event, we had a Royal Commission and they made 66 recommendations for change. You've got to do things differently. Some of them with many dot points below them. One of them said this, that the state revise the approach to community bushfire education in order to equip all fire agency personnel with the information needed to effectively communicate to the public as required. So what are they saying here? What are they actually saying? The CFA, you keep telling us you've got 60,000 volunteers and they're all great at jumping on a truck and putting wet stuff on red stuff. But why is it only a handful of your fire agency personnel, your paid staff, that are going into communities to talk to people about this? Why can't they, or aren't they, the 60,000, able to have these important conversations? Our third driving force for change was this man. His name's David Chalk. He's a social demographer. And not long after Black Saturday, he released some research that, it was touched on the panel discussion earlier today, or some similar research. It wasn't exactly the same, but where they analysed the most highly trusted people in a local community. And local firefighters rank really highly at one end. They're regarded authoritative and authentic. And I think from memory, the real estate agents and the lawyers were at the other end. And he spoke, when he was talking to CFA about his research, he spoke about CFA's trump card being its local men and women, the power of localness. And he said that the community are most likely to listen to a local firefighter from their community walking up their driveway, that they will, I'll listen to you, I trust you, I'll act on what you tell me to do. The power of localness. They were our impetus for change. Identify your impetus for change. The second tip is, has this movement been generated before? Of course, someone might have been on it. In fact, CFA, there are brigades out there that have been engaging with their community since the dawn of time, but we'd almost stopped encouraging it. Aside from our Fire Safe Kids program, which is where our brigades are encouraged to go to their local primary school and take the truck and have and give a lesson on basic fire safety, we'd almost told our volunteers, no, you just put fire out. We've got some experts that will come into your community and have the conversations. We needed to swing that pendulum back. And then we asked New South Wales and Queensland. New South Wales Rural Fire Service had some real success with a biannual conference. Staff and volunteers together, but getting together to share some lessons learned. A bit like an event like this, where they were sharing some initiatives to learn from others. I'm going to come back to that. And the other one was Queensland, who with some different risks and almost no funding, had some real volunteer-driven success built on a team of champions. And I'm going to come back to both those things. But the second tip is ask, has the movement been generated before? Beg, borrow, shamelessly steal it. The third is find your coalition of the willing. Whatever the problem, there's always people that can be the solution. And a lot of people at this point told us our volunteers don't want to do this. You know, our volunteers have got enough to worry about. Struggling to get people on trucks to go put them out. But we decided to surround ourselves with the positive people who said, yes, we can, or more importantly, we already are. Does anyone know where this is? Wollongong, well done. This is Wollongong. So based on what I said before, what we knew about the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and what they'd done, they were having their biannual conference in Wollongong, staff and volunteers, and CFA said, right, we need to learn as much as we can off this, and we bought 15 tickets. We could only fill 10. So from our 60,000 volunteers, we couldn't find 15 people to go there. Looks pretty nice to me. Have a free 3 days talking community education and fire awareness. And initially we were probably a bit down about that, but we said, you know what, we've got 10 and we've got to keep them. And by the time the 10 that went were back on the bus, they said, we want one in Victoria. Another one said, no, but call ours a forum, right? And have more time for discussion rather than a conference. Another one said, yeah, and have it more kind of grassrootsy initiatives. It doesn't have to be best practice. And we said, you want a forum in Victoria? Would the 10 of you like to be the organising committee? Find your coalition of the willing. The next is to value and trust your pioneers. This funny looking bunch is the most fabulous group of people I've ever come across in my life. We call them the volunteer reference group. You might call them a consultative network, a steering committee, the super duper A team, it doesn't matter, right? There are people out there already living this. If you set it up and value their contribution, they'll return it in spades. Value and trust your pioneers. So the initial 10 from Wollongong, they became the first iteration of this group. And again, people in our office are saying, you're going to organise one in Victoria? No one's going to come to that, are they? Our volunteers, talking to the community about fire awareness, they just want to, no, it's not, they just want to jump on a truck and squirt water. But they started planning it, and collectively we decided that if we seriously value and trust them, one of them is going to MC it. And more of them are going to man the registration desks. And more of them are going to fill the bulk of the schedule. And that all paid off when the event came around, because at that first event we had 140. So from our initial 10, now we had 140 volunteers representing 70 different communities from across Victoria, together talking community engagement, fire awareness. Why did they turn up? Because it was built by them. It was a forum for volunteers, by volunteers. That authenticity was generated. And they asked, are you coming to the forum or are you coming to our forum? Set up a reference group, genuinely value and trust your pioneers. They'll return it in spades. 5 is to recognise those doing it well. Recognise those doing it well. You can gain real momentum through examples of what you want others to achieve. So rather than write a one-size-fits-all program, go and do exactly this step by step in your community, we decided to share real examples of our volunteer brigades that were already doing this as a model of what we wanted others to achieve. And sure enough, from our 10 and our 140, there was some already doing this and doing it well. I'm going to go through a couple of the examples. So the Violet Town Fire Brigade, they have 2 trucks. They've got 2,000 homes in their community. Violet Town's a little town in northeastern Victoria. And they decided they were going to door knock every one of those 2,000 properties and say to the resident that answered the door, we've got 2 trucks, we've got 2,000 homes. If there's a really bad day in Victoria and there's fires across the state, what are the chances that we might not actually get a fire truck to your house? This red bucket might be your fire truck this season. You might want to think about having a plan and leaving early. There's some information there in our open days on Sunday you can come and chat to about us more. Or the Clunes Fire Brigade, who Lindsay Pritchard and his team at the Clunes Fire Brigade, they stand out outside the post office in the main street of Clunes every single Saturday morning, and they've got one message, one job for the community for the week. Every Saturday morning, 9 to 12, they're outside the chemist in the main street, and this week it was clean your gutters, the next week it might be to download the Fire Ready app, the week after it might be to cut your grass or to make a plan for you and your family. But there's one job. They're already doing it every Saturday morning. We put them on a podium. Or the Olinda Fire Brigade, although they're standing in front of Monbox fire truck here, but the Olinda Fire Brigade, they've got a larger community. They run an expo. They hire out the footy oval, and they've got rides and fun stuff for the kids, but they've got fire safety demonstrations and information for the adults. They do that every year, but they can. The point is, influence the behaviours you want by sharing through examples of what you want others to achieve. If it's not absolute best practice, it doesn't matter. People are smart enough to adapt it. Would the red buckets work in my community? Well, maybe not, but maybe I've got more of a house fire risk. Maybe I'll do it with smoke alarm batteries. So they feel great about themselves, and it gives a real context for others that might be interested in having a go. You can gain momentum. And based on that model, the second year we ran a forum, and this time 220 volunteers were there, representing 100 different fire brigades from across the state. We amped it up even further, and this time, in our third year, every brigade member that registered for the event, we asked them, what's one thing you've done as a fire brigade to connect with your community this year? What's one thing you've done? And a few people wrote back. And 2 weeks later, we sent another email and we said, you must have missed our last one. What's one thing you've done to connect with your community this year? If you've got a photo, great. A couple of dot points, that's all we want. We turned every one of them into a poster. And at the next forum, every single brigade that was there had a poster of one thing they'd done. It gives credit to those already doing it. They feel part of it. And in that third year, there was 300 people there, this time 160 brigades. And you could hear the chatter in the room, oh, we've done something similar to that. Have you seen our poster? At the end of the forum, they wanted to take it home with them. No worries, you can have it. Recognise those doing it well. It gives them credit to keep doing it. It gives a real context for others. It builds momentum. The sixth tip is set the destination, not the journey. This is Martin Luther King. Did he have a dream, or did he have a 12-point step-by-step process? He had a dream. Set the destination, not the journey. For us, the destination or the outcomes, we wanted the community to be safer and more resilient. We wanted them to be making informed decisions about their fire safety. We want them to be prepared. Do we care how they get to those outcomes? Do we really mind how they all get there if they get there? These people are out in there, they're living in these communities, they're sharing those risks, they know who the key players are. Let them own it. So by now we'd really started to respect what our volunteers were doing to get their own communities to those destinations. And again, we're coming from a culture that had largely shifted away from that. One where our volunteers were just expected to fight fires, and it was staff with expert knowledge to come into our communities to deliver this. And some of them are great at it. Don't get me wrong, they were and still are great at that. But now we're talking about an additional capacity, not just an additional capacity, a trusted, authoritative, authentic, local capacity to converse on an important topic. Now the conversation here is what's our risk? What are we going to do? Where will our kids be? And if the reference group decided that they wanted a support toolkit to help them with their community, we helped them build one. And if they wanted a sample role description to help them with their roles, we helped them write one. If they wanted a training package, we worked with our training team and we helped them develop one. Set the destination, support them with the journey. Tip 7, there are only 8, we're nearly there. Stand by the movement at every opportunity. Any movement you're on, people will try and challenge change. And it's important to stand by the movement at every opportunity. This is our previous Chief Officer, Ewan Ferguson. And he stood up at that state forum every year and he said, this is the work of all of us. If we're serious about protecting lives and property, this is the work of all of us. And greater still, the CFA board, a couple of years ago, our board signed off that on every brigade management team, so all 1,200 brigades across the state, from now on, every one of them is going to have a community safety coordinator on their BMT. Massive change for some, right? Used to jumping on a truck, fight fire. Now, on election night, they have to put a name in that box as to someone's got a community safety portfolio. If you're doing nothing right now, don't care. If all you do is you wheel out the total fireban day sign on a hot day, fine, great, that's a great start. We'll start from there, yeah? But it's important. We value prevention and suppression. That's what our CFA Act says. Stand by the movement at every opportunity. People will challenge it. The last point is do the critical thinking, get the critical commitment, and the critical mass will come. So the critical thinking, why are we doing this? That catalyst for change, the outcomes you need. Then the critical commitment, and that I'm talking about both the chief, the CEO, the board, as well as, I think more importantly, your grassroots pioneers, those already doing it, willing to do it, that can influence others. And for us, that group, there was a moment at the end of that third forum, funding post-Black Saturday starting to dry up, where people started to say, oh, how are we going to do this? There's 300 people coming to this event now, 160 brigades across the state. Is this sustainable? Can we keep doing it? But it was our grassroots pioneers, some brigade captains at that point, that were writing to our chief officer and saying, this is one of the greatest things I've been part of in my time as a volunteer. You must support this. And another one of them, our volunteers, is off seeking grant applications and writing to potential sponsors to make their event more sustainable. Then the critical mass comes. In our fourth year, we had 400 members, this time from 200 brigades across the state, 200 grassroots communities. The largest number of CFA brigades in one place and one time in the organisation's history. And then last year, the SES approached us. And they said, does it matter if the community are talking about fire or they're talking about flood or they're talking about storm? We said, no, And together we teamed up with them and we had 500 volunteers across CFA and SES. And even better, 96% of them, those that stayed to fill out a feedback form at the end of the 2 days, 96% of them rated the overall event as either very good or excellent. Why? Because it was a forum for volunteers, by volunteers. Their fellow volunteers were on the podium, their own poster was in the foyer. And it's not just about the growing numbers here. I'm going to, if we've got a little bit of time, Andrew, I'm going to, a couple of our reference group are here, and I'm going to ask them about their personal experience. This is not just about numbers. If there's one person or they're 500, if they're not having a great experience, it doesn't matter. But before I do that, I want to ask, or I want to pose, are we there yet? And we could argue that, if I referred back to that Royal Commission recommendation, equip all fire agency personnel with the information needed to do that. We could argue that we'd tick that box after 6 weeks. Developed a little pocket guide with the key messages, sent it to every one of our volunteers and said, this is what we mean, go and say this to your community. These are the key messages, stick to that. Tick, we've done it. But in reality, can we turn every one of our CFA volunteers into community educators? No, we can't. And it's not why most of them join CFA. And this is nothing against those that do jump on the truck and go and fight fires, because we need them too. But what we've now created is a genuine, meaningful role for those that are interested in the prevention education space. And there is now an active group of around 500 of them driving that activity in their local communities. And now they're organising their open day, they're running their brigade Facebook page to their own community, they're at their local show, school, fete, market, they're doing targeted door knocks, they're visiting the school. They're either picking something off the shelf that's another brigade or a written program that already exists, or if it doesn't work or they want to adapt it to their own community, we encourage them to develop themselves and have a go. So through co-design with those already doing it, we'll now continue to profile community safety roles as a genuine, meaningful volunteer opportunity for an organisation that in the past potentially hasn't. Thank you very much.